SLT Mobitel, the connection. SLT Mobitel, the connection.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, no peace. The UK confirms core group's resolution against Sri Lanka at the looming UNHRC session. Is it magic? State Minister Nalaka Godaheva questions as to how the UN Human Rights Chief came to her conclusions without her agents visiting the island.
She has no way to find out that detailed information about Sri Lanka, what's going on. It's very much opinions, not facts.
Don't be a hollow hero. Acting Minister of Health fires a volley at MPs who refuse to be vaccinated. What's the point? The Cardinal repels the new committee appointed to make recommendations on the Easter attacks PCOI report. All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Saturday the 20th of February 2021.
ඇල්කොහොල් අඩංගු hand sanitizer භාවිත කරන්න. ලෙඩ රෝග ඇති කරන විෂ බීජවලට එරෙහිව සටන් කරන්න. හඳුන්වා දීමේ මිල රුපියල් 350යි.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhammika Ekanaika. Now let's start off by taking a look at the pandemic situation. Acting Cabinet Minister of Health, Professor Channa Jayasumana urges the members of Parliament to be vaccinated against COVID-19 without uttering hollow words of heroism about being the last ones to be immunised. Professor Jayasumana reiterated that all members of Parliament were chosen to be vaccinated for good reason, as they carry a higher chance of infecting people owing to their frequent public engagements.
Sri Lanka's COVID-19 cases stayed within the 500 range for a second consecutive day yesterday, with 517 cases. As such, 506 infections were confirmed from 22 districts of the country, while the remaining 11 involved Sri Lankan expatriates. The Colombo district accounted for 152 infections, while the Gampa district reported 111 cases. 57 cases of the virus were confirmed from Kandy, while Kalutara reported 40 and Ratnapura confirmed 23. A further 123 infections were recorded from 18 other districts. Meanwhile, 528 new coronavirus infections have been confirmed so far today. In the meantime, Sri Lanka's COVID-19 death toll rose to 433 yesterday after 3 persons succumbed to the virus. All of the victims were men. In other developments, since Sri Lanka's vaccination program began on the 29th of January, a total of 263,779 persons have been vaccinated so far. Yesterday alone, 30,307 persons were immunized with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. The vaccination program began with the frontline healthcare workers, the police and Triforces, and was then opened up to the general public on the 15th of February. However, health authorities have stated that all those under the age of 18, as well as expectant mothers and lactating mothers, will not be administered with the vaccine due to the lack of scientific evidence available on these groups.
මේ වෙනකොටත් අපි ලැයිස්තු ගත කරලා තියෙනවා සිතියම් ගත කරලා තියෙනවා ලංකාවේ වැඩියෙන්ම රෝගීන් වාර්තා වුණ ග්‍රාම සේවා නිලධාරී කොට්ටාශ මොනවද වැඩියෙන්ම රෝගීන් මිය ගිය ග්‍රාම සේවා නිලධාරී කොට්ටාශ මොනවද කියලා මේ දත්ත මත පදනම් වෙලා අපි අනුපිළිවෙල හදලා තියෙනවා වැඩිම අවදානම තියෙන එකේ ඉඳන් පල්ලෙහාට ඒ අනුව ඉහළින්ම අවදානම තිබුණ ප්‍රදේශවල අවුරුදු 30ට වැඩි කාණ්ඩයේ ජනතාවට මේ වෙනකොටත් අපි එන්නත ලබා දෙමින් පවතිනවා අවුරුදු 60ට වැඩි උදවියටත් එන්නත ලබා දීම අද දිනේ සිදු කෙරෙනවා ඒ වගේම හෙට දිනේදීත් ඒ කටයුතු සිදු කෙරෙනවා ඒක නිසා විශේෂයෙන් මම ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා අපේ වැඩිහිටියන්ව රැක ගන්න ඕන මොකද COVID-19 රෝගයට ගොදුරු වීමේ වැඩිම අවදානමක් තිබුණේ අවුරුදු 60ට වැඩි කාණ්ඩයේ ජනතාවට. ඉතින් පසුගිය දින දෙකේ එන්නත් දීපු ස්ථානවල අවුරුදු 60ට වැඩි එම ප්‍රදේශවල පදිංචි ජනතාවට වැඩිහිටියන්ට එන්නත් ලබා දීම සිදු කෙරෙනවා. ඔබගේ නිවසේ වැඩිහිටියෙක් ඉන්නවා නම් කරුණාකරලා මේ ස්ථානයට එක්කන් ගිහිල්ලා ඔවුන්ව ආරක්ෂා කරන්න අපිට සහයෝගය ලබා දෙන්න කියන ඉල්ලීම කරනවා.
The acting health minister also offered an explanation on the decision to vaccinate all members of parliament. The MPs drew flack recently for jumping the vaccine queue.
පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීවරුන්ට එන්නත දෙන්න තීරණය කරේ සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යාංශයේ එන්නත ලබා දිය යුතු කණ්ඩායම් කවුද කියලා තීරණය කරන කමිටුවක්. ඒ කමිටුව මගින් හඳුනාගත්ත ප්‍රමුඛතාව ලබා දිය යුතු කණ්ඩායම් මොනවද? ඒ අනුව පළවෙනි අදියරේදී ඉදිරිපෙළ සෞඛ්‍ය සේවකයන් සහ ආරක්ෂකාංශ සමාජිකයන්ට එන්නත ලබා දුන්නා. ඊට පස්සේ මැනින් වෙළඳපොළ, ඒ වගේම මාළු වෙළඳපොළ, කොළඹ නගර සභාවේ සේවකයන්, ඒ වගේම වෙනත් අත්‍යවශ්‍ය සේවාවල නියැලෙන කණ්ඩායම් වලට එන්නත ලබා දෙන්න ඕනත් කියලා තීරණය කරා. ඒ වගේම වැඩියෙන්ම ජනතාවත් එක්ක සමග ගැටෙන වාහකයන් ලෙස ක්‍රියා කළ හැකි කණ්ඩායම් වෙන වෙන වශයෙන් හඳුනාගත්තා. ඒ එක කණ්ඩායමක් තමයි පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීවරු. ඒ අනුව තමයි උන්ට ලබා දෙන්න ඕන කියලා නිර්දේශ කරේ. දැන් අපි දකිනවා මන්ත්‍රීවරුන්ට ඇවිල්ලා එන්නත ලබා ගන්න කිව්වම සමහරු පුහු ඊර වෙන්න කියනවා මම ගන්න නැහැ ලංකාවේ ඉන්න අන්තිම කෙනාටත් දුන්නට පස්සේ එන්නත ලබා ගන්න කියලා. මම නම් කියන්නේ මේ පඬිත කතාව වැඩක් නැහැ. ඔබ ඉන්නේ අවදානමක. ඔබට වැඩිය ජනතාව මේ රෝගයට ගොදුරු කිරීම සඳහා ඔබ විශේෂයෙන්ම වාහකයෙක් ලෙස ක්‍රියා කරන්න පුළුවන්. මොකද පාර්ලිමේන්තුවේ තියෙන සතිය ඔබ ඉන්නේ කොළඹ. ඒ ඊළඟ සතිය ගොඩක් වෙලාවට ගම්බිම් වලට යනවා. එතකොට කොළඹ තියෙන මේ අලුත් වෛරස් ප්‍රභේදය ගම්බිම් වලට ගෙන යන්න පාර්ලිමේන්තු මන්ත්‍රීවරු වාහකයෝ ලෙස ක්‍රියා කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒක නිසා තමයි උන්ට එන්නත ලබා ගන්න කිව්වේ.
Meanwhile, 890 persons were discharged from hospitals after successfully recovering from the novel coronavirus today, pushing the total figure to 73,456. This places the country's number of active COVID-19 cases at 5,833.
Pay just 500,000 rupees to reserve your unit today. Mulberry Residence.
Now then, leaders of the G7 countries have agreed to intensify cooperation in response to the coronavirus pandemic and increase funding commitments for the rollout of vaccines in the world's poorest countries to $7.5 billion. This decision comes at the heels of UN backlash for rich nations over vaccine hoarding and a poverty advocacy group revealing that Australia, Canada, Japan, the UK, the US and the EU having purchased over 1.2 billion doses of COVID vaccines than they actually need. Meanwhile, French President Emmanuel Macron has urged the West to do more in helping developing countries roll out vaccines. But his calls may not simply be out of benevolence and looks to contain political elements as well. Macron cautions the West of losing its power if poverty-stricken African nations turn to Russia and China for their COVID vaccine needs. In recent times, rich countries have been under media spotlight, being accused of what is dubbed vaccine nationalism. As criticism mount, especially with a non-profit entity revealing that Australia, Canada, Japan, UK, the US and the EU are in fact hoarding over 1 billion doses in vaccine reserves, G7 leaders have held a virtual meeting yesterday, agreeing to increase financial commitments to global vaccination efforts. The club, comprising Britain, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan and the US, said in a joint statement that they have increased financial commitments of over $4 billion to ACT-A and COVAX, taking the collective G7 support for poor countries to roll out vaccines to $7.5 billion. But many leaders, however, were unwilling to say exactly how much vaccine they were willing to share with the developing countries or when. Following the G7 meeting, German Chancellor Angela Merkel said that fair distribution of vaccines was an elementary question of fairness, but added that no vaccination appointment in Germany is going to be endangered. French President Emmanuel Macron, meanwhile, was much more firmer in his target, saying Europe and the US should allocate up to 5% of their current COVID-19 vaccine supplies to the poorest countries very fast. He also called on the Western nations to supply 13 million doses of COVID-19 vaccines to African governments as soon as possible, which would cover 6.5 million health workers alone in the continent as he addressed the Munich Security Conference. Macron noted that it would represent just 0.43% of the West's vaccine stocks. But his calls for the West to help people in Africa was not completely out of benevolence. He said that if the West fails to deliver the promised vaccine doses for another 6 to 12 months, Russia and China would benefit since, as he termed, our African friends will be pressured by their populations to buy doses from the Chinese and the Russians or directly from the laboratories. Macron added that if that happens, the power of the West, of Europeans and Americans, will only be a concept and not a reality. Now then, the core group on Sri Lanka confirms that it will forward another resolution on Sri Lanka at the United Nations Human Rights Council. British High Commissioner in Colombo, Sarah Hulton, took to Twitter today to post a public statement by the core group, which consists of Canada, Germany, North Macedonia, Malawi, Montenegro and the UK. Despite giving recognition to Sri Lankan government's progress in rebuilding infrastructure, demanding land return and resettling internally displaced persons, the statement says that more needs to be done to address what the group calls harmful legacies of war and build a sustainable peace in the country. It said that the UNHRC will consider the report published by the Office of the UN Human Rights Chief this month, and informed by the report, the core group intends to present a resolution to promote reconciliation, accountability and human rights in Sri Lanka. The 46th regular session of the UNHRC is set to get underway on the 22nd of this month. State Minister of Urban Development, Coast Conservation, Waste Disposal and Community Cleanliness, Dr. Lanka Godeheva questions as to how the United Nations Human Rights Chief assessed the ground situation in Sri Lanka when the pandemic situation prevented her representatives access to the island. Speaking to Indivari Amwatha on our current affairs program at Hyde Park on AdaDerana 24 today, the State Minister also insisted that the government does not harbour an anti-America sentiment and that the government has categorically communicated to the UN body the needlessness of confrontation owing to the government's willingness to cooperate.
The last government from 2015 onwards, we co-sponsored a resolution and then the present government said you will not comply, and now this question again, the United Kingdom is going to, together with certain other countries, co-sponsor a resolution. What is the stance of the government now?
The government has clearly rejected Resolution 30/1. Which never had parliamentary approval, which never had cabinet approval. However, already most of the suggestions, except a few, have been implemented, like the Office of Missing Persons and all those things. We are not disbanding them. Those institutes will be supported, the budgets have been allocated, and the process will continue. But the way it was approved, we are not in agreement.
The UN Human Rights High Commissioner says there is demonstrated unwillingness by the government move forward. Does this mean that the government has not worked together with these UN organizations, acting arbitrarily?
When I look at the latest report by the Human Rights Commissioner, we are surprised to see the content. This time the report is very much a kind of an interference into Sri Lanka's internal matters, challenging even the constitutional changes that we did with two-thirds majority in the parliament in a democratic country. If you really look at her report, the bulk of its contents relate to the last 1 year. Her comments surprises us because last year we all know we have a global pandemic. Nobody could travel. None of their agents came here. She has no way to find out that detailed information about Sri Lanka, what's going on. And how can she make this kind of opinions? And if you really read that report, it's very much opinions, not facts. So government has taken every allegation in that report one by one and submitted a response. We have clearly explained why some of those allegations are blatant lies. We are going to continue most of the things that the previous government agreed in the 30/1, even though in principle we don't agree to passing that resolution. So how can you say that we are not cooperating?
How does Sri Lanka plan to respond to these sessions and these resolutions?
Normally before the report is written, they write to us asking certain questions which Sri Lanka government responded. Then I think February the report came and now we have responded to the report as well. Now she'll be making her final report at the session. If she takes what we have told seriously, we sincerely hope she will, because we have very in detail explain why some of those information that she has got are wrong. So if she goes through and make a proper representation at the session, then at the session we will answer. We categorically told, don't come into confrontation, we are willing to cooperate.
There's perception that the present government is unable to maintain good relations with the United States and these Western powers, unlike the government of the good governance. When the past resolution too, there was co-sponsorship and there was some sort of cooperation happening between governments. But now it seems that there is confrontation between these institutions and government. That's the perception. How do you look at this?
I think you used the right word in the very perception. This government has made it very clear in our policy manifesto also. We are a very neutral government. We are not biased towards a single country. That we have made it very clear not only in our manifesto. President has told that repeatedly in his speeches. As ministers, we have repeatedly told that to whoever we meet, the ambassadors, even American ambassador, current ambassador has visited myself and she has met all our ministers, and I don't see any problem. We have our views, they have their side of the story, we have our side of the story. We discuss, we agree, sometimes we agree to disagree, but there's no anti-American thing in our government. America is a friend. Of course, they are having a lot of discussion right now, even on business investment. I believe the current ambassador will do her utmost to develop this further, and that's the impression I get. We are inviting the American government to engage. We we are inviting American investors to come. We are not rejecting them at all. So this story about confrontation is pure perception.
How well are we working with India, our closest neighbour, especially after the East Container Terminal matter? Along with that, what sort of an impact will be there in international relations, especially India supporting Sri Lanka in these incidents?
Yes. There were times India-Sri Lanka relations were very, very strong. Later there were instances or years where this relationship got little sour. However, it started improving quite a lot after His Excellency Narendra Modi became the Prime Minister of India. Even with the previous government here, they started building a very good rapport, and I think it got improved further after Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa got elected here. Mr. Narendra Modi and Mr. Gotabaya Rajapaksa met. They have very good understanding. I think there's a continuous dialogue going. And if you look at the recent past, all the vibes I'm getting from our side is positive about India and India's relationship. What happened at ECT, I think, is a little bit of a miscommunication. Perhaps this would have been communicated a little earlier with India. Of course, the cabinet paper, when it was submitted, India made a statement saying that the previous agreements have to remain, and I respect that. They have to say that. I think informally discussions had already started about that. Even I was involved to some extent with some of the companies who are involved in this, and there was an understanding what we were going to do is the best for both countries, a win-win situation. I think now the discussion is continuing. I'm very sure it will be amicably resolved. Like in the case of America, I mean, we consider India a friend. That's a government policy, and we want India also to come and invest and be partner of trade.
Going back to the question of the UNHRC sessions, what countries are we working together with? Because we saw certain opposition members saying that Sri Lanka will not have our traditional allies supporting Sri Lanka this time around.
We are working with all the countries possible. There are 47 countries, and with the recent changes in the composition, we are in a better situation. Some of our friendly countries have now come in. It doesn't mean that all 47 will support us. I mean, there are certain countries traditionally will not support. There are certain countries who will always support us. There are certain countries in the middle. So we are talking to all those people. Our ambassadors are talking to them. President is personally talking to the ambassadors here, and we are educating them. Even our response to High Commissioner's report has been shared with all these countries. So now we are presenting the real facts and asking them to support, and we'll wait and see.
Now, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is extremely disappointed over the distortion of his statements for political gain. Undeterred, however, the head of state pledged to forge ahead and do what's right by the people. Speaking during a program in Puttlam today, the president also urged branches of the state mechanism to end their tug of war and instead work together for the betterment of the people.
The 11th phase of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's program to engage with the rural community, titled Gama Samaga Pilisandarak, was worked off in the area of Karuwalagaswawa in Puttlam today. The initiative enables people to communicate their grievances directly to the president and discuss their issues. During today's leg of the program, the head of state first called at the Muriyakulama Primary School. He then proceeded to the community hall in Karuwalagaswawa.
මේ වැඩසටහන ගැන ඉතින් විරුද්ධ වාදීන් බොහොම ඉන්නවා. මේකේ වැරදි පැති පෙන්නලා දෙන්න. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලොත් බය ඇති රාජ්‍ය නායකයා ගිහිල්ලා මිනිස්සු හම්බෙලා කතා කරනකොට ඒගොල්ලන්ට ඉස්සරහට තියෙන අවස්ථාවක් නැති වේදෝ කියලා බයකුත් ඇති. එහෙම බය වෙනකොට තවත් යන්න ඕන. තව බය කරන්න. ඒක තමයි උපක්‍රමය. ඉතින් ඒකම මේ වගේදී දෙන මේ මම සමහර කියනවා වැරදිව අර්ථකථනය කරනවා. මම ගිය හැමතැනකම වගේ ඒ වගේ ඉඩම් ප්‍රශ්න පිළිබඳව හැමතැනම කිව්වා. බොහෝ වෙලාවට පාරම්පරිකව තමන් වගා කරපු තමන්ගේ වගා භූමිය ළඟම තියෙන භූමිය. ඊට පස්සේ වන රක්ෂණ වනජීවි වලින් මායිම් ගල් දැමීමේදී යම්කිසි දෝෂයක් නිසා මේ පාරම්පරික වගා කරපු භූමි අල්ලලා මායිම් ගල් දාලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මේක කතාව හැමතැනකම වගේ කිව්වා. එතකොට මම ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් වශයෙන් අපි සාකච්ඡා කරලා කිව්වා මේවා මේ අයට මේ වගා කරපු බිම් ගානක් වගා කරපු බිම් ඉඩ දෙන්න කියලා. එතකොට ඒක මන් දන්නේ මොකද්ද තේරුම යන්නේ නැත්තේ කියන්නේ. නමුත් එහෙම තියෙද්දි වනාන්තරයේ ගිහිල්ලා වනයි කපනවා කියන අවසර දීලා නැහැනේ. දැන් කැලයක් කපනවා නම් ඒක නිලධාරීන් වහාම නවත්තන්නට ඕනේ. ඒක නෙමෙයි කියලා තියෙන්නේ. මොකද තමන් වගා කරපු භූමි අර Google map එකකින් බලලා ලකුණු කරාම ඒක වැරදි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඉතින් ඒවා නිවැරදි කරලා දෙන්න ඕනේ. ඒක තමයි මම කිව්වේ. මේවා කඩාකප්පල් කරන අදහසින් වැරදි මත එනවා. එතකොට අර අවශ්‍ය දේ සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒවා දැන් ඉතින් සමාජ මාධ්‍යත් ලෑස්තිලා ඉන්නවා බොරු ප්‍රචාර කරලා මේ වගේ වැඩ කඩාකප්පල් කරන. විශේෂයෙන්ම ප්‍රාදේශීය සංවර්ධන කමිටුව තාමත්ම වැදගත්. දිස්ත්‍රික් සංවර්ධන කමිටුව තාමත්ම වැදගත්. මේ නිලධාරීන්, ඒ ප්‍රාදේශීය නිලධාරීන් මේ කමිටු වලට සහභාගී වෙන්න ඕන. විශේෂයෙන්ම මහජන නියෝජිතයන් සමග එක්ව වැඩ කරන්නට ඕන. ඒක තාමත්ම වැදගත්. මම හිතන්නේ මේ දුර්වලතාවය තියෙනවානේ. නිලධාරීන්ගේ සහ ප්‍රාදේශීය නියෝජිතයන් සමග වැඩ කරේ නැත්තොත් කරන්න බෑ. ඉතින් මේ දැන් ඕගොල්ලෝ මේ එක කඹ ඇද්දම පරිසරයෙන් මේ පැත්තට අදිනවා. වනජීවීකෙන් මේ පැත්තට අදිනවා. වන රක්ෂණිකෙන් මෙහාට අදිනවා. එතකොට වෙන්නේ මහජනතාව තැලෙනවා. එකට එක්කාසු වෙලා කොහොමද කරන්නේ කියන එක බලන්නට ඕන. දැන් අවශ්‍යතාවය දන්නෝනේ. මේ කුඩා වැව් ප්‍රමාණය සුද්ධ කරලා මේ වතුර වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් රඳවා ගන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්න මේවා ප්‍රතිසංකරණය කිරීම.
We will see shortly. Bear with us. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith, is unimpressed with the appointment of the new committee to make recommendations on the Easter attack report compiled by the Presidential Commission of Inquiry, which has already made recommendations pertaining to the spate of terror. Speaking to media, the Cardinal says it is merely an attempt to redact the Easter Commission report. Meanwhile, a 24-year-old suspect who is believed to have been terror-trained by attacks ringleader Zahran Hashim has been arrested by the Terrorist Investigation Division in Mavanella.
A 24-year-old woman was taken into custody by the Terrorist Investigation Division in Mavanella last night for maintaining close ties with the Easter attack perpetrators, including its ringleader Zahran Hashim. Identified as Mohammed Ibrahim Sahida, she is alleged to have received terrorist training from Zahran Hashim. She is the sister of Mohammed Ibrahim Sadiq Abdul Haq and Mohammed Ibrahim Shahid Abdul Haq, the main suspects in Lord Buddha statue vandalism in Mavanella. The suspect duo were arrested 1 week after the terror attack while hiding inside a shoe shop in the area of Gampola. Subsequently, the father of the suspects was taken into custody by the police. As per reports, the arrested 24-year-old woman had been interrogated following the Easter attacks.
Zahran Hashim had conducted various instruction classes in respect of Wahhabism and extremism for women. The TID arrested 6 female suspects in connection with these Wahhabism classes on the 7th of December 2020. Yesterday, another female suspect was arrested. She is a 24-year-old girl from Hingula Mavanella area.
Meanwhile, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa appointed a committee yesterday to study the Presidential Commission's report on the Easter Sunday attacks and the Sectoral Oversight Committee report on national security. The committee, chaired by Minister Chamal Rajapaksa, also includes 5 ministers, namely Johnston Fernando, Udaya Gammanpilla, Ramesh Pathirana, Prasanna Ranatunga and Rohitha Abegunawardena. In the wake of this appointment, Archbishop of Colombo, His Eminence Malcolm Cardinal Ranjith rejects the appointment of the committee while calling on the government to release the full report of the PCOI, which probed the attacks without redactions. He made this remark during his unannounced visit to St. Sebastian's Shrine in Katuwapitiya today, which was the target during the attacks.
නමුත් කමිටු දාලා තමන්ට අවශ්‍යයි කියන දේ තෝරා ගැනීමේ ප්‍රතිපත්තිය අපි පිළිගන්නේ නැහැ කොහොමදවත්. අපි ඉල්ලන්නේ මේ වාර්තාව සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම එළිදරව් කරන්න. වාර්තාවේ තියෙන සමහර දේවල් හංගන්න අවශ්‍ය නැහැ. ඒ හැම එකක්ම එළිදරව් කරන්න. එතකොට අපි තීරණය ගන්නම් මොකද්ද කරන්න ඕනේ කියලා. මේකේ යම් ආකාරයක රජය බය වෙලා කියලා මේක හංගනවා කියලා අපිට යම් ආකාරයක හැඟීමක් එනවා. ඒ කමිටුව අපි පිළිගන්නේ නැහැ. නිලධාරීන් ටික දෙනෙක්ව හිරේ දාලා ඉවර වෙලා මේකට පිටිපස්සේ ඉන්න බලවේග මොනවද කියන එක හංගන්න දෙන්න බෑ අපිට. මේකේ සාධාරණ කිඩුන් නැත්තම් මේ විපාකනේ මොකක්ද ඊළඟ පියවර? අපි කිව්වනේ අපි ජාත්‍යන්තර සංවිධාන වලට යනවා කියලා ඒක අපි යනවා. හැබැයි පොවාසේ මේ වෙද්දි වතිකානුවේ පාපු වහන්සේව රෝමේ දැනුවත් කරලා තියනවාද මේ සම්බන්ධයෙන්? උන්වහන්සේලා දන්නවා ඒක ඔක්කොම උන්වහන්සේලා සමග සාකච්ඡා කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒ වගේම තව විවිධ සංවිධාන තියෙනවා අපේ කතෝලික සභාවේ ජාත්‍යන්තර සංවිධාන ඒ සංවිධාන වලට කරුණු ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න අපි ලෑස්ති.
With a legal challenge having been launched by a group of male senior superintendents of police against the promotion of DIG Bimshani Jasingarachi in Supreme Court, Many opinions have been expressed in support of the senior woman police officer, with accusations of discrimination being levelled at her male colleagues. The Women's Parliamentarian Caucus and the Minister of Public Security recently voiced their displeasure towards the legal challenge. With that, calls have also been made for the archaic police ordinance at the centre of the issue to be abolished.
The promotion of career police officer Bimshani Jasinarachi as Deputy Inspector General of Police by the Independent Police Commission last year was hailed as a step forward in inclusiveness and gender equality. The move was considered significant due to the startling fact that the Sri Lanka Police Department has never had a woman appointed to the position before. At the time, DIG Jasinarachi's promotion was a cause for celebration among a large section of the public, who finally believed it to be a sign of positive change in the previously male-dominated Sri Lanka Police Department. However, earlier this week, the celebrations were somewhat short-lived, following the filing of a petition by a group of senior superintendents of police in the Supreme Court, challenging her ascension to the rank. In the petition, the group of 32 SSPs cite an archaic section of the police code that makes no mention of the word women in relation to the promotion to the post of Deputy Inspector General of Police. On this basis, the petitioners are seeking a Supreme Court ruling that the promotion was made in violation of the standard promotion procedure of the Sri Lanka Police Department. The petition also seeks a ruling that the promotion violates their fundamental rights guaranteed by the Constitution. Featuring prominently among the 32 petitioners is SSP Ruwan Gunasekara, the current head of the Police Legal Department. However, according to the Women's Charter of the Constitution, women are guaranteed, quote, the same rights and the same opportunities in employment in the public, private and informal sectors at all levels of employment without gender-based discrimination in recruitment, placement, promotions, conditions of service and job security, unquote. The issue has understandably provoked a fair share of public ire in a country that considers it a matter of national pride, its election of the world's first woman Prime Minister as far back as 1960. This included an outpouring of support from various sections of society, including the Women Parliamentarians Caucus, who expressed their displeasure at the move and called for the establishment of a parliamentary committee to inquire into injustices and malpractices taking place against women in Sri Lanka. Chairperson of the caucus, State Minister of Primary Healthcare, Epidemics and COVID-19 Disease Control, Dr. Sudarshini Fernanda Pulde pointed out the need for a parliamentary committee with full powers to investigate various forms of violence, discrimination against women, as well as the impedances pertaining to women in their professions.
ඒ වගේම මේ රටේ අග්‍රවිනිශ්චයකාර තනතුර ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් ශිරාණී බණ්ඩාරනායක මැතිණියට ඒ වගේම මේ රටේ අධිකරණ ඇමතිකම ගන්න පුළුවන් නම් තලතා අතුකෝරළ මැතිණියට මම හිතන්නේ නැහැ නියෝජ්‍ය පොලිස්පති ධූරයක් කාන්තාවකට කරන්න බැරි වෙයි කියලා මම හිතන්නේ නැහැ. අපිට අහන්න වෙලා තියෙන්නේ එහෙමනම් ඇයි මේ කාන්තාව පොලිසියට ගන්නෙ? එහෙමනම් මුලින්ම තිබුණා කාන්තාවන්ට පොලිසිය තහනම්. කාන්තාවන්ට හමුදාව තහනම්. එහෙමනම් ඒගොල්ලන්ට දාන්න තිබුණා. ඕගොල්ලන්ට සුදුසු වෙන්නේ කුස්සිය උයාගෙන ඉන්න එක විතරයි දිලිව කියන්න තිබුණා.
Commenting on the issue recently, Minister of Public Security Dr. Sarath Virasekara too expressed his disappointment over the legal challenge.
මම ඉතාම කනගාටු වෙනවා ඒ වගේ දෙයක් කිරීම ගැන. ඒ වගේම තමයි අපි අත් වශයෙන්ම පොලිසියක් හැටියට අපි ආඩම්බර වෙන්න ඕනේ. මොකද කාන්තාවකට නියෝජ්‍ය පොලිස්පතිකම ලැබීම ගැන. ඉතින් ඒ වගේම තමයි ඒ කාන්තාවට මම හිතන්නේ ජාත්‍යන්තර සම්මානයකුත් මීට සති කිහිපයකට ලැබුණා. මම හිතන්නේ ඒ නඩුවෙන් ජයග්‍රහණය කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙයි කියලා.
Now with the Supreme Court set to hear the petition on the 18th of May, there are many eager to see if the court will issue a landmark ruling in favour of the equal rights of women, or whether the 32 male police officers will be vindicated in their claim. With that, Attorney-at-Law Himali Kularatna says that any law or regulation that clearly discriminates a person based on gender or race needs to be abolished, as what remains supreme is the freedom guaranteed by the Constitution.
The constitutional law, which is the supreme law of the country, has guaranteed the rights of the people, has given the equal protection to all the people. Any person's rights shouldn't be discriminated based on gender or any other race or status of that person. Persons means it doesn't indicate that only men. It means every human being, the mankind. And if there is any regulation, any rule, any law which doesn't provide the equal protection and equal guarantee to the women as well, that law should be amended. There are so many cases where the rights of women have been violated. I mean, there are so many crimes against women. Shouldn't there be a female higher ranking officers to handle those cases?
And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.